I was sitting in my corner office, looking out at the Seattle skyline while the city hummed softly behind the glass walls. The view should have felt satisfying, but my attention snapped to the screen when an email popped up. It was from my younger sister. Dad lost his job. Mom's medical bills are burying us. I know you've got your own expenses, but if there's any way you can help. A dry, hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. If only they had any idea. 12 years earlier, when I was 16, I stood in the cramped living room of our townhouse in Tucson, Arizona. My acceptance letter to the Rhode Island School of Design lay on the coffee table between us, and my father's expression was dark and stormy. "That's not a real career, Elena," he said, snapping the letter up and waving it like it carried a disease. "You're going to waste your life chasing nonsense. Grow up." My mother lingered near the window, quiet and worn down. She almost never spoke when my dad went off like that. Instead, she shrank into herself, leaving me alone to take the hit. "I have a partial scholarship," I said quietly, "and I've saved money from tutoring and summer jobs. It's enough." "No," he shot back. "You're going into engineering like your sister." End of discussion. But for the first time in my life it wasn't. No. That one word cracked something open between us. His face flushed, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "Then get out," he said. "If you think you're so independent, prove it. Just don't come crawling back." That night I stuffed thrift store clothes into an old duffel bag. My sister Claire stood in the hallway, eyes wide. "You're serious?" she asked. "I have to be," I told her. "I can't keep living a life that isn't mine." As I zipped the bag closed, my mom slipped into the room. She didn't say much, she never did, but she pressed something small into my hand. It was a faded velvet pouch. "Your Aunt Margaret wanted you to have this when the time was right," she said softly. "I think that time is now." Inside was a delicate silver pendant and a tiny folded note taped to a small brass key. The note mentioned a safety deposit box. Later that night, holed up in a cheap motel outside Phoenix, I finally read the letter. "Elena, if you're reading this, you've taken the first step toward becoming who you were meant to be. I'm already proud of you." In that moment, I knew I wasn't going back. Not to beg, not to explain, only to build. "Always knew you would." That was the first line of Aunt Margaret's second letter. She wrote that the key opened box 132 at Puget Sound Credit Union and told me to open it when I was ready. Inside, she promised, was everything I needed to begin. She reminded me that real art isn't just about making something beautiful. It's about seeing value where others see nothing. The next morning, I walked into Puget Sound Credit Union, my hands shaking as I showed my ID. The safety deposit box was small, but what it held felt enormous. Inside were several pieces of antique silver jewelry, neatly bundled stacks of documents, and another letter written in Margaret's looping handwriting. That letter revealed the truth. Aunt Margaret hadn't been a casual collector with a taste for pretty objects. Back in the 1940s, she'd been a serious antique dealer, quietly building a hidden legacy. The silver pieces weren't souvenirs. They were authentic Art Nouveau and early Art Deco designs. Rare, refined, and carefully passed down through generations. The letter gave me one instruction: take them to Victor Leone at Rain City Antiques. He'd know their real value. When Victor finished his appraisal, my knees nearly buckled. The contents of that box were worth more than $430,000. But the money wasn't the part that changed my life the most. Victor studied me for a long moment, then tilted his head. "You've got an eye most people never develop," he said. "Ever think about learning the trade?" That question lit the fuse. Victor took me under his wing and taught me everything: how to authenticate metals and stones, how to read provenance records, how to negotiate quietly at auctions, and how to spot buried treasure at dusty estate sales. I was hooked. By 19, I had launched a small online vintage jewelry store. By 23, I opened my first brick-and-mortar boutique in Capitol Hill. And now at 26, I own a chain of private antique galleries across the West Coast, with a personal net worth north of $14 million. Not a single headline ever carried my name. My family still thought I bounced between odd retail jobs or rented some tiny studio apartment in Spokane. I liked it that way, quiet growth, low profile. Until Claire's email. "Dad's out of work." Mom's drowning in hospital bills. Could you help even just a little? I stared at the screen, then picked up my phone. Hey Claire, I said. Bring Mom and Dad to my office tomorrow. My office? She asked. You mean that consignment shop you used to help out at? No, I said. My real office. Rainier Tower. I'll text you the address. She laughed nervously. We'll see. You can't just walk into Rainier Tower pretending. I smiled and glanced back at the city stretched beneath my windows. I bought Rainier Tower outright last spring. Trust me, they'll let me in. Just be there at 9. And tell Mom and Dad to bring every page of their mortgage paperwork. The next morning, I stood by the window on the top floor of Rainier Tower and watched my family's worn blue SUV pull into the private entrance below. Even from 30 stories up, I could sense their hesitation as a uniformed security guard approached and guided them past the main lobby to the executive elevator. The intercom chimed softly. Miss Russo, your family has arrived, my assistant said. Send them in, I replied calmly, turning to face the door. The second they stepped inside, the shock hit them all at once. Dad stopped dead in the middle of the room, eyes darting across the polished walnut floors and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sunlit Seattle skyline. Mom gripped the doorframe, taking it all in without a word. Claire stood behind them, blinking hard, like she could erase the scene if she tried hard enough. They'd expected a cramped shop, maybe a shared workspace, not a high-ceiling gallery office filled with rare Art Nouveau sculptures, glass cases displaying antique silver and gemstones, and a custom rosewood desk that once belonged to a Rockefeller estate. And definitely not the sweeping panoramic view of Seattle stretched out beneath me like a quiet victory. Elena, my mom whispered, her voice shaking. What is all this? I smiled gently at her. This is my office. Welcome to Russo Fine Art and Antiquities. My father's face hardened almost instantly, his expression racing from confusion to disbelief and then straight into anger. No, he snapped, jabbing a finger toward me. You work retail. You live in some tiny apartment. He scoffed. I've seen your pictures. Cheap dinners, laundromats. I walked over to a nearby glass display and tapped it lightly, drawing their attention to a delicate Art Deco brooch inside. I bought it years ago for just $700. Actually, I said evenly, I'm the founder and CEO of the largest private antique brokerage on the West Coast. Those posts you saw were staged, carefully curated fiction. Claire's jaw dropped, but no sound came out. The Rainier Tower, she finally managed. It belongs to you? It does, I said softly. Technically, the building was owned by my firm, but since I owned the firm, the distinction didn't really matter. That's when my dad lost it. You hid this from us? He shouted. Your own family? You did all this in secret? I cut him off before he could spiral further. Yes, I succeeded quietly. I built something real, and I proved you wrong. I returned to my desk, took a seat, and nodded toward the folder clenched in his hand. Now let's talk about your mortgage. The room went heavy with silence. My father's fury drained away, replaced by stunned stillness. My mom reached out, running her fingers along the smooth edge of my desk like she needed physical proof that this wasn't some impossible illusion. And if you think that moment was intense, just wait until you hear what came next. Claire remained frozen, lips parted, staring at the original Chihuly sculpture glowing beside my espresso station. I opened my laptop, logged into my business dashboard, and slowly turned the screen toward them. Since we're being honest, I said calmly, this is my current balance. $14,236,542. Mom gasped sharply, clutching her chest. Dad's grip tightened on the arm of the leather chair until his knuckles went white. Claire dropped the folder she'd been holding like a lifeline, the same designer portfolio she'd proudly shown off last Christmas after her promotion. This, I said, sliding a thick file across the desk, is why you're here. You're 3 months behind on your mortgage. Foreclosure has already started. Claire blinked hard. How do you even know that? I didn't hesitate. I own a controlling stake in Cascadia Trust. They hold your mortgage. I know everything. I looked at my dad. Your reckless day trading. Mom's medical bills. Then I turned to Claire. And your Capitol Hill condo flip. It's completely underwater. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the muted hum of the city outside the glass walls. Finally, my dad's voice scraped out. "You knew we were drowning and didn't say anything. We're your family, Elena." I stood slowly and placed both hands flat on my rosewood desk. "Do you remember the night you told me to leave?" I asked quietly. "Don't come crawling back when you fail." Those were your words. "We were trying to protect you," he said defensively, his eyes narrowing. "No," I replied, calm but unmovable. "You were trying to control me. That's not the same thing." I walked to the massive window, sunlight pouring in, the Space Needle rising in the distance, an emblem of the empire I'd built quietly over the past decade. 10 years, I continued. No help, no faith, just me, my instincts, and the key Aunt Margaret gave me. Mom looked up sharply. "Margaret? What did she give you?" "Belief," I said, turning back toward them. "She believed in me when none of you did. She knew I'd build something real." My gaze swept across their stunned faces. "Every holiday you mocked me. Still playing with antiques, Elena. Why don't you work for Claire?" Claire lowered her eyes. "But now," I went on, my voice steady, "now that you've seen the numbers, suddenly I matter. Suddenly I'm family again." My father straightened, slipping into his familiar business tone. "We can discuss all this later. Right now we need—" "Stop," I said, lifting my hand. My voice was cool, precise. "Before you say anything else, let me show you something." I pressed a discreet button on my desk. Behind me, the massive wall-mounted digital screen flickered on. One by one, file windows spread across the display. Bank statements, property deeds, loan defaults, investment records. "This," I said, gesturing toward the glowing screen, "is everything. Every debt, every mistake, every bad decision." I paused. The total amount needed to erase it all and stabilize everything comes to exactly $2,400,000. My father's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in over a decade. Hope. Claire looked torn between disbelief and relief. My mom reached for my hand, brushing her fingers gently against mine. I pulled back, not unkindly. "I've had that money set aside in a reserve account for years," I said. "Every foreclosure notice, every downward spiral. I saw it all." "Waiting for what?" Claire whispered. "To see if any of you would change," I answered. "To see if you'd take responsibility. You never did." I stood again, letting the silence stretch until it pressed against the glass walls. "Instead, you borrowed more. You refinanced again. You blamed bad luck." I crossed the room and settled back into my chair, sunlight catching the Chihuly sculpture behind me. "Here's what's going to happen," I said clearly. "I'll pay off every debt. I'll save the house. And I'll set up a trust to make sure all of you are financially secure." Relief spilled out of them all at once, voices overlapping. I raised my hand and the room went still. "But," I said firmly, "there are conditions." The air tightened. "First," I said, locking eyes with my dad, "you retire. No more stocks. No crypto schemes. You rest. You've earned that much, but you've cost us enough." His jaw clenched and his eyes dropped. "Second," I said, turning toward Claire, "you're shutting down the failing Capitol Hill condo project," I said, turning to Claire. "And then you're enrolling in the music therapy program you once dreamed about, before real estate swallowed your life." Her eyes widened and a single tear slid down her cheek. She hadn't talked about that dream in years. "Third," I said gently, looking at my mom, "you're finally opening that bookstore near Green Lake. I'll fund it." She gasped, her eyes filling with light. That dream had been set aside more than 30 years ago, so she could support my dad's ambitions. "And lastly," I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn, "we're all going to therapy together. Every week. Because this isn't just about money anymore." Dad drew in a sharp breath, clearly ready to argue, but Mom placed a calm hand on his arm. "All of it," she said softly. I nodded once and pressed the intercom. "Olivia, please bring in the contracts." When the documents arrived, I slid the thick folders across the desk. "These make everything official. Take them home. Read every word." They nodded, still shaken. Dad's hands trembled as he held the paperwork, like it might vanish if he loosened his grip. As they turned to leave, I spoke one last time, my voice steady and unbreakable. "And Dad, about what you said 10 years ago. About me calling when I failed." He stopped and turned back, his face caught between guilt, pride, and regret. "I never failed," I said quietly. "I just succeeded without you." They left without another word, the silence trailing behind them like a shadow. I stood at the window, watching their SUV disappear into Seattle traffic. A moment later, Olivia stepped in and placed a cup of chamomile tea on my desk. "You okay?" she asked gently. I paused, thinking about the long nights working until dawn, the empty holidays, the moments when doubt crept in and tried to take over. Then I thought about this calm, this clarity. "Yeah," I said at last, a small smile forming. "I think I finally am." The next morning they returned with signed documents, tentative smiles, and the weight of a new future hanging between us. It didn't fix everything overnight. Years of silence and old wounds don't disappear with a signature. But it was a beginning. One quiet morning over coffee, Dad, truly retired this time, apologized. I didn't cry, but his words cracked something open inside me. Mom opened the Violet Finch bookshop in Fremont, a cozy space tucked between a record store and a coffee roastery. Locals love it. More importantly, so does she. Claire dissolved the condo project and enrolled in music therapy. Now she teaches at a community center in Ballard. Her laughter sounds real again, unforced, free. As for me, I kept building, but I stopped hiding. I stopped shrinking my wings. I stopped pretending to be small so others could feel big. Because real power isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. On my desk sits Aunt Margaret's old jewelry box. Inside is the one piece I never sold. A simple gold locket with her photograph tucked inside. On the hard days, I open it and reread her note. True art isn't just about creating beauty. It's about recognizing worth where others see none. She was right. And the rarest treasure I ever uncovered was my own worth. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment. Share your turning points. Tell me if you've ever had to walk away from people who didn't believe in you, or if you're still searching for your voice. This isn't just my story. It's for anyone who's been underestimated, dismissed, or quietly pushed aside. Let's connect. Let's build something together for builders, dreamers, and the so-called black sheep who became visionaries. I didn't share this for pity or praise. I shared it because we're often told to make ourselves smaller to keep others comfortable, because ambition gets labeled defiance instead of growth. So here's my advice. Don't wait for permission to become who you're meant to be. Choose yourself even when no one else does. And if you're still in the fight, keep going. The loneliness won't last forever. Your work matters. You matter. One day, when the people who doubted you finally see what you've built, you won't need their validation. You'll already have your own. If you want to support stories like this, stories about turning pain into power, hit subscribe. Let's keep telling stories that matter. And if you're carrying dreams you've never said out loud, let this be your sign. You don't need their approval.